I've always thought aliens were real since I was 4. Since I had a conversation with another 4-year-old and we came to the conclusion that I remember a TV show called Kids Are People Too. So apparently kids in general had the same problem that black people still do have a problem, where they weren't treated as people, which that Black Lives Matter is where we're at right now, which black people saying, hey, we're people too, you know. So apparently there was a show like that for kids back in the 70s, which I totally agree with the Black Lives Movement. Totally. These people just stop needing to be messed with. One episode of this in particular kind of sticks with me. And this is an episode with Kiss. And that's pretty much all I can remember. There was an episode of this show called Kids Are People Too, and Kiss was on it. And it was like, holy cow. Wow. Those are some very strange people. I ran away from home from that house. My grandparents lived walking distance from that house. I couldn't tell you how many blocks, maybe a mile, something like that. So what I remember from running away was having every single bit of clothing all in a giant ball, right? So as big as I could possibly hold, and then left the house, and I'm dropping clothes the whole way. And I got outside, and then I had to come back to ask if I could cross the street. And I remember my dad said something to the effect like, you're running away, so it doesn't really matter. I walked on my way to my grandparents' house, which I didn't make it before my mother came and picked me up. We had a little blue Volkswagen Beetle. I remember being small enough to climb behind the back seat in that car. So my mother picked me up and took me home. And I don't know, that's pretty much all I remember. So I had this friend. He lived basically like down the block from my grandparents on my mother's side. So his family, his mom and dad, they were like both overweight type people. This kid ended up like his dad died and he was like there, or had a heart attack or something, and like literally like did CPR on his dad for like a super long time, and his dad still died. So that was years later. I went to the guy's funeral. They took me to a baseball game. It was just adds to my mother's demon theory. We'll call it the demon theory. So, at this baseball game, apparently I remember, I was trying to catch the balls that were coming in, and I would attack the people that got the balls and like pull on their clothes and try to get them to give me the ball. And when they dropped me off after that baseball game, my friend's mother came into the house to tell my parents what a just horrible kid I was. She just went on and on and on how I was the worst behaved child, and how she would never, that woman hated me like I was a demon from that point on, she hated the fact that I would, anytime she didn't want her son playing with me. I mean, yeah, I guess I went into little demon mode, trying to get the foul balls or the home runs or whatever they were, free balls. Wanted a little baseball for my trip to the baseball park. So I can neither confirm or deny that I was a little demon. I have to assume that these people knew more children than me, and their assessment of me was that I was a little demon, and that probably was the case. What am I going to do? I mean, my mother literally claims I was a little demon from like the second I was out trying to get up out of the little box. So I'm consistent. John Denver comes to mind as a memory from those years. I had another little friend that lived in the same block that I did, but all the way, it was a big block. Well, I was a little kid, so maybe it wasn't that big, but all the way down on the other end, around the corner. And I remember one day walking with this little kid, and our whole conversation revolved around aliens and if they existed or not. And our conclusion was, how could they not exist? Now you might, like, we're talking about, I mean, I guess I might have I had to have been in my 4s before my parents were letting me like walk around the block by myself or with a friend. So at 4 years old, I was having an intellectual conversation with another kid that was in my age group about aliens, and our conclusion was that, you know, look at how big space is and all this. And I remember laying in my backyard with my dad. Might have been during some, it was the summer, it was probably hot as hell in the house, is probably what it was, but laying in the backyard with my dad counting stars. And so back then there was a lot less light pollution, so you could see, being in the city or the outskirts of the city, you could see the stars a lot better. I've always thought aliens were real since I was 4, since I had a conversation with another 4-year-old, and we came to the conclusion that it would be impossible for it to, okay, now these are 4-year-olds. I've talked about my grandparents on my mother's side, and they lived like not too far down, not too far away, like I said, like about a mile away, maybe not even, maybe a half mile, I don't know, I never really measured it. I was over at their house quite a bit compared to my dad's grandma's, like night and day. The amount of time I spent at that point in my life was like the far majority was with that side of the family, right up the street. Although the other grandma wasn't that far, she lived in the same part of town. It just wasn't literally right up, up the street, around the corner, like within a mile. The other grandma was probably like within like 5 miles maybe. So the time I'd spend there at the grandparents' house, Grandpa, he was in the basement doing amazing craft work. He had a lathe, a metal lathe, a metal mill, so he could work any material basically. He had a big bandsaw. He had a grinder. He was an engraver. He would have cannons cast, so he would make a cannon out of wood on the lathe in the dimensions that he wanted, and then he would send that off to a company that would give him back a bronze casting of the same rough shape that he had sent them. And he did this tons of times. He made so many cannons. He would engrave guns, modify. I don't know if he would actually modify. He would go through guns like a gunsmith would. He would add some really intricate handles and engraving to them. Now, whether he was actually like working on the, other than just like cleaning up and making efficient the mechanism in the gun, I don't know if he was modifying that stuff at all, but he was super into guns, super into shooting target practice style guns. These little 22s that would only shoot one shot, and then they're like an Olympic style gun was kind of what he ended up really getting into. And then there was Grandma, and she was upstairs smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee, playing cribbage or a word puzzle, and she would cook and clean and watch TV and shop and talk on the phone to different people and take care of all the books and take care of all the everything. So Grandma took care of the house and Grandpa built stuff. That was kind of their arrangement. They slept in different rooms. As the years went on, I kind of learned of more and more stuff that honestly, you know, I just never want to actually know. Ignorance is bliss. You know, but back then, when I was, you know, we're talking, you know, like not even 5 years old right now, my grandparents were like, I think like my favorite people in the world. I think they felt the same about me. I think I was my grandma's. I was the first grandson, and then the second was my cousin, which was a girl, and then the third was a cousin, which was a girl. That was my uncle's kids, and then my mom had another kid. They lived a little farther out of town than we did. My uncle worked on nuclear plants, specifically Trojan, and then a place up in Washington, cleaning up a mess. I don't know